There's not too much going on with Star Wars right now, but there was some pretty big news about Dave Filoni and that he was promoted. He is now what is called the Chief Creative Officer of Lucasfilm. Here's what the official interview by Vanity Fair said. Dave Filoni has a new mission in the Star Wars universe after guiding Rosario Dawson's force-wielding hero to distant celestial realms in the first season of Ahsoka. The writer, producer, director, who started working alongside George Lucas on the animated Clone Wars show nearly 2 decades ago, has ascended to a new position at Lucasfilm, one that will give him input into all the galactic storytelling going forward. Filoni says, "Now I'm what's called Chief Creative Officer of Lucasfilm, which places him into development process much earlier and in a much more expansive capacity than his previous advisory duties." Filoni goes on to say, "In the past, I've been on a lot of projects that I would be brought into. I would see it after it had already been developed a good ways. Filoni will now work more directly with Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy and alongside Carrie Beck, a veteran producer turned head of development, to originate and spearhead the next generation of Star Wars shows and movies. After spending years involved in the creation of Star Wars animation, including the Rebels series, he became increasingly involved in live action as producer with Jon Favreau on The Mandalorian and The Book of Boba Fett." Filoni goes on to say, "In this new role, it's opened up basically everything that's going on. When we're planning the future of what we're doing now, I'm involved at the inception phase. I'm not telling people what to do, but I do feel I'm trying to help them tell the best story that they want to tell. I need to be a help across the galaxy here, like a part of the Jedi Council almost." Filoni described his responsibilities as understanding the intent of the filmmakers and being a resource to them, based on his mentorship under Lucas himself and his years spent steering the Clone Wars, Rebels, and Ahsoka. Filoni says, "Literally hours now of Star Wars storytelling have I done," before pausing to think about his syntax. "See, I even phrased that like Yoda. Ha ha ha, Dave Filoni, I get it. We all watch Star Wars." So, anyways, this really does sound like Dave is going to be helping out plan the future for Star Wars stories, and it feels like they're going to start connecting the shows and the movies in a lot more significant way, because you have to have someone like Dave who's creatively involved in all of these projects from start to finish. That's what the story group I think was supposed to be, but I think they kind of lost the plot as time went on. I mean, there's way too many people in the story group trying to connect so many different shows, movies, books, comic books. We all know Dave doesn't care about the books or the comic books, so he's really just going to be focusing on creating stories that interconnect the shows and the movies. What I think is great about this is now we know that Lucasfilm is fixing its old mistakes with the sequels and actually planning out the future of Star Wars movies and TV shows. This is a great decision by Lucasfilm to have someone help plan this out. When we were starting a new era of Star Wars storytelling, you really do need someone to look at this and go, all right, what are we doing here? Where are we going? What's the plan? These new films coming out in the next 10 years, they do need proper planning, and I'm glad we're getting signs of this plan 3 years before the next movie releases at least. The article goes on to talk about the future of Star Wars projects in the works and what we can expect, so let's look at that. At Star Wars Celebration, the fan convention this past spring, a number of new projects were announced by Kennedy, including a feature film from Filoni that would help bridge the decades-long gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, a space that The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka are already busy filling. Filoni will continue developing his film as well as exploring a possible second season of Ahsoka while serving in his new position. Filoni says, "To truly help filmmakers, it was really important for me to understand it by experience firsthand." He says, "I also can lend a perspective on challenges that telling these stories will present. I feel more capable of actually being helpful outside of just saying, well, Jedi are like this and Sith are like this." All the titles from Star Wars Celebration are still on the books, Lucasfilm officials say, including a historical epic about the early origins of the Force from Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny filmmaker James Mangold, a story revisiting Daisy Ridley's Rey from director Shamin Obad-Chinoy. Upcoming television projects include The Acolyte, set in the High Republic era, about a century before the Star Wars story fans first encountered in 1977, and Skeleton Crew, a show about a group of long-lost space travelers set in some time after the Empire's defeat in Return of the Jedi. I don't care about that. But anyways, as president of Lucasfilm, Kennedy will continue leading the overall company, and Beck's role will involve recruiting other Star Wars storytellers into the fold, while Filoni weighs in on a narrative level. This article revealed a lot about the inner workings of Lucasfilm, but the biggest takeaway is that Dave Filoni is now a center force when it comes to the Star Wars stories of the future. All the new films and shows still seem to be in the works. I mean, they just said that everything that they announced in celebration of 2023 is still in the works. And I think that's a good sign, honestly. It means that not too much has changed with the strikes and everything that's been going on in Hollywood. But it's curious that it's Dave Filoni, I guess. I mean, it's insane to think that he's going to have an influence in every single upcoming project. And I can't say I'm surprised by this move. The fans have been asking for this for years now. Dave has continued to move up in the ranks of Lucasfilm, and many of the diehard Filoni supporters claim that he is the next George Lucas. And I really don't agree with that. I don't agree with a lot of the praise that Dave Filoni gets. And I mean, I have to be honest, looking at his work, it hasn't really blown me away. He's had a huge influence on Star Wars over the past 10 years, but a lot of his work, like Rebels, Bad Batch, even Ahsoka, they weren't great. And I'm not, saying they're bad, but, it leaves more to be desired. And just looking at the numbers, a lot of Filoni's biggest projects were not the highest rated of the new Star Wars projects, or really garnered a lot of viewership. Mandalorian and Andor are clearly the biggest and most successful projects from Lucasfilm in recent years. The Mandalorian was created by Jon Favreau, and it's his show. He is the biggest reason for the first season being such a massive success and such a great show. But a lot of people have turned the Mandoverse into the Filoniverse, and giving him credit for things like The Mandalorian, where he deserves credit for the work that he did on it, but people ignore the fact that this was Jon Favreau's show. You look at something like Andor. Filoni had literally nothing to do with Andor. He wasn't an executive producer. I don't really know if he did anything at all with that show. I mean, when you look at all the live-action Star Wars projects and Star Wars shows, this is the one that has the least Filoni involvement, if not at all. And it's one of the best. So it's really odd to me that, like, the two best things that have come out of Star Wars in the past 5 years, The Mandalorian and Andor, don't have a lot of Filoni written all over it, but a lot of people will say that, oh, Filoni's the future, but you look at projects like Ahsoka, or Rebels, or Bad Batch, and Tales of the Jedi, and they don't really get a lot of the same praise. So I'm just a little nervous about Dave Filoni's new role. I know fans give him a lot of praise, but it's odd to me, because the fans who claim they love the Clone Wars and love the prequels also say they don't like Rebels, they don't like Resistance. No one even talks about Bad Batch or Tales of the Jedi. So it's just a weird situation for me to look at this and be like, yes, Dave Filoni is perfect for this position. And for me, the more Dave Filoni has gotten involved with Star Wars, or the projects that he's worked on, the less I tend to enjoy him. I have this running joke with Dave Filoni that he is full of member berries, and nothing that he's done has proven me wrong about that. I mean, Ahsoka was full of member berries. Rebels was full of member berries. Bad Batch, member berries. I mean, this is what Dave Filoni does. Even his episodes in The Mandalorian, in the first 2 seasons, were member berries. So that is who his Dave Filoni is, and that's who he's always going to be, and that's fine. But I'm just looking at this from an outsider thinking, yes, he's come up through Lucasfilm, and yes, he's a great choice, but he's not the next George Lucas. George Lucas worked on so many things outside of Star Wars before he made Star Wars. He directed, he directed at least 2 films before he did Star Wars. And then he went on to do other stuff outside of Star Wars, like Indiana Jones, and then, Howard the Duck, and Red Tails, and all that stuff. Dave Filoni has only ever been in Star Wars. And he's not the writer that George Lucas was, and George Lucas wasn't a great writer. And he's definitely not the director that George Lucas was. And George Lucas is a good director, but that's not his preferred role either. So it's just odd to me that people are claiming this guy's the next George Lucas when he's not. He's just clearly not. I think the reason we say that is because George Lucas did mentor him. But Dave Filoni worked with the writer's room when it came to Clone Wars. He worked with the writer's room when it came to Rebels. It's not like he did all this stuff by himself. And the biggest thing that we've seen with Star Wars in the past is what works best is collaboration. And what I like about what they're doing and the way Dave is approaching this is saying, I'm here to help. I'm here to help these people tell their stories in the Star Wars universe, and now I can explain it to them in a way that they will understand because I have experience. So yes, I'm a little nervous about Dave Filoni taking on this role. I'm a little nervous that we're going to get more of the same of what we've already seen. And it is insane to me for people to be like, oh my god, Dave Filoni saving the future of Star Wars. When I look at the past and I'm like, okay, well, let's ignore the 3 sequel films and just look at everything else. Most of that, except Andor, has had Dave Filoni's influence on it. And everyone seems to not really like a lot of the recent Star Wars projects. A lot of you people who say you don't like Star Wars don't like a lot of the new projects, and those all happen to have Dave Filoni in it. So I'm a little cautious about giving this man so much influence and control over the future of Star Wars, because this isn't going to be a big change in my opinion. Not everything's going to be new and different and better. I think we're going to get a lot more member berries and a lot more connecting of the tissues between these Star Wars shows and movies. And some of the things that have made the Dave Filoni stuff hard to enjoy, like if you've never seen Rebels or Clone Wars, or I'm trying to think what else, maybe The Mandalorian or something, and then you watch Ahsoka, you're kind of thrown out of the loop. I mean, it's hard to follow Ahsoka if you haven't seen all the prerequisites of shows and books and all that crap leading up to it. We might have that problem going forward. And it's going to be great for the diehard Star Wars fans like us who are actively in the community and keeping up with every story that they put out, because Dave Filoni makes content for people like us. Dave Filoni makes things where, oh, you have a new character in this show? Well, he's going to be introduced in live action years later. That's what Dave Filoni is doing. That's what he's been doing. That's his bread and butter. If you like that, great. If you don't, oh man, I'm really nervous and I'm really sorry for you. But overall, I mean, this is what Lucasfilm needs. Lucasfilm needs someone in the big chair saying, okay, how are we going to connect all this, and how are we going to plan out the story? How does this show connect to this movie, even though they're hundreds of years apart? They don't need anything verbally connecting them by saying, oh, you remember that battle of Yavin 4 all those years ago? You don't need that, but you do need consistency, continuity, and Dave Filoni can fill that spot right now. Ahsoka is the most Dave Filoni project ever. And while there's a lot of highs and lows in that show, I love a lot of the highs in that show, and I'm never going to forget them. There's also a lot of things about that show I really don't enjoy. So if I get more of the same Ahsoka-style content, I think Star Wars is going to be in a really bad place for years to come. But that's my biggest concern, is that we're going to get stuff like Ahsoka and not stuff like Andor, or not stuff like The Mandalorian. And I don't want you to think that this is me saying I don't like Dave Filoni, or I don't think he's the right person for the job. But he makes me nervous because I don't love all his work, and he has, in the Star Wars fandom at least, a lot of supporters and he has a lot of detractors. And I think this is going to be a big test for him if he can really pull himself back from doing the member berry stuff and the usual tropes that he's known for, and just let these other filmmakers and creators come in. The biggest problem Lucasfilm has had is creative differences, and now you have another hand in the pot that could possibly add to those creative differences. So overall, very good move by Lucasfilm. Would I have picked Dave Filoni for this role specifically? Probably not, but that's just me being biased against Dave, because I've looked at his work and said, you know, you're good at what you do, but you need someone else kind of guiding you, like we had with The Mandalorian. So we'll see what happens, but overall, very good move by Lucasfilm. It's time we start planning out the future of Star Wars. And even though I don't think Dave is the perfect role for this does make me more excited for the future of Star Wars. We have at least 3 to 5 new movies coming out in the next 10 years. God knows how many shows. You do need someone to sit down and look at it all and know how everything connects. Even though James Mangold's film might not have anything to do with the Rey Star Wars movie, you still need someone to look at it and go, okay, but if you do this in the Dawn of the Jedi film, it's going to mess up things that would happen in the Rey Star Wars film, and vice versa. So it's good to have someone like Dave come in and take that role on, but maybe could have been somebody else. Who? That's a topic for another time. Doesn't matter now. It's Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni is the future of Star Wars. And what do you think about that? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Tell me your thoughts about Dave Filoni upgrading his role over there at Lucasfilm, and what your hopes are for the future of Star Wars. If you like this video, please leave a like and support the channel. Subscribe to see more Star Wars content like this. Thank you all for watching. I'm Star Wars Only. I will see you all next time, and may the Force be with you. Always.